Hey there, and welcome to Discovering the Way, a video series from Redeemer Anglican Church. My name is Colin, I'm the lead pastor. When the Jesus movement was first beginning, it was known as the Way because people recognized that following Jesus involved the everyday, ordinary moments of our life. And so the church, followers of Jesus, have engaged practices for centuries that have helped keep us walking in the way of Jesus. And over the last 5 weeks, we have been looking at one each week. And this week, we're going to finish up our series. I'm looking at one that is very, very relevant to our current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. So in this season of pandemic, we actually have a pretty big problem. And the problem is that we don't know how to feel sorrow anymore. We have lost the ability to voice our pains in a healthy way. We don't know how to live in a world filled with problems that we have no power to fix. Now, notice not all of humanity has lost this ability, but particularly those who live in the global West, particularly those who are probably like you and me, Americans, we've lost our ability to grieve and to experience pain in a healthy way. And this is coming at us from not just secular culture, but it's Christian culture as well. In secular culture, this is going to come at you in two different ways, really. First, and especially this happens in the South, but it's all over. There's this mentality that says, buck up, get over it, control your emotions, stuff the pain. Whatever you do, don't talk about it. Don't bring it up to anybody. And so following that mentality, we seek to distract ourselves from the feelings that we have, from the grief and the pain and the confusion. We seek to eliminate silence in our lives. We want to stay busy. We want to escape to other worlds, whether it's in our phone or in Netflix. We want to do whatever possible to make it, to pretend really that this heartache or this grief doesn't exist in us. The second way that we find this in secular culture, though, it's going at the same goal, but in a different route. And that's if we are feeling sorrow or pain or hurt or confusion, this response goes on the attack. It seeks to avoid engaging those feelings and rather blaming people for the fact that we are experiencing this sort of pain. You can find this response all over social media right now. People pointing fingers and finding ways in which, instead of dealing with the emotions that they have, they're still ignoring it. They're still pretending that it's not there. They're just doing it by going out on the attack. But as I said, Christian culture isn't any better because Christian culture has this tendency to say that faith in Jesus functions kind of like a emotional force field, just repelling any and all negative emotions that we may experience in our life. It says that that faith in Jesus will remove the hurt, will protect you from confusion and discouragement in your life. And so now, what that has created, though, for followers of Jesus, is now in this time of pandemic, we we are beginning to say, well, I am downcast. I am discouraged. I am grieving the loss of everything familiar. I'm grieving sickness. And does that mean that I just don't have strong enough faith? And so what's happened then is that compounding our sorrow, we now have to deal with shame. This is a problem. This is a big problem. And so in our final week, I want us to talk about a spiritual practice that has been with the church from the very beginning. And it's a practice called lament. Specifically, it is praying lament. So what we see is that the scriptures, the Bible, it dispels all of these myths about a painless life of faith or faith driving away all grief and sadness from followers of Jesus, because tears are very much a part of the biblical witness. Think about it. Orphans, slaves, widows, sinners of all kinds, entire cities, kings who rule over him, the oppressed, the sick, the exiled, the defeated, the bereaved, all of these people groups weep. They all experience and voice their sorrow. They all cry out to the Lord, as does Jesus. Jesus weeps at the death of his friend. Jesus is brokenhearted at the oppression and violence that he sees in Jerusalem. Jesus is overcome by emotion in the garden before he goes to his crucifixion. The Lord seems to be very much at home in our tears and in our sorrow and in our grief. And so we need to find a way in which we can be at home in them, engaging them, not avoiding them, but pressing into them. Because sometimes, often actually, the best response to the brokenness of our world and our lives falling apart, falling to pieces in a lot of ways, is going to be a mixture of tears and prayer. And that is precisely what these prayers of lament are all about. You see, when we're at the end of our resources, we are almost wired to cry out. We're wired to weep and to cry out for help. And so prayers of lament are a way of approaching God in the realities of our sorrow and pain and frustration and loss. And it's a way of approaching God so that they do not consume us. Now, the act of voicing your sorrow and grief and crying out, it usually doesn't solve anything. That's not the purpose of this. This isn't a pray over something and it will immediately be gone. Prayers of lament, though, they address the rawness of that pain, because it is taking that pain and throwing ourselves at the mercy and into the arms of God as a way of addressing the rawness of that pain. And so to say or to utter a prayer of lament is to trust God with our sorrow and our grief. It's to trust him with our tears and our emotions and our shouting and our railing and our confusion. It's to trust that our emotions, positive and negative, are never too much for the one who has created us. And so we can go to him because he can hold those emotions as he holds us. So how do we do it? How do we practice lament? Well, there's many different ways and methods to do that. But a good starting point, and the one that I will recommend to you, is to start with the prayers of lament that we actually find in the Bible, because the Bible is filled with examples of this practice. There's an entire book of the Bible appropriately named Lamentations. Right? It's a book of lament, of these prayers of lament. Israel has been crushed by Babylon. There are immense food shortages and famine. People are being killed in the streets. The survivors are being carted off to foreign lands. And that's when the prophet Jeremiah pens these words. He cries out and he weeps with sorrow in Lamentations. And here's just a quick excerpt from it so you can kind of see what we're talking about here. The prophet writes, "My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So I say, my endurance has perished, and so has my hope from God. Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him." So what do you hear in that? Do you hear the tears? Yes. Do you hear the hope? Yes. Do you hear the sorrow and the grief? Yes. Do you hear his conviction and his faith? Yes. It's all there. This is what prayers of lament are all about. Bringing the tears and searching for the hope, but doing it in the presence of God. One of the things I love about this particular prayer is that there's a truth, a tension in it that is so true to our experience. Jeremiah says that his endurance has perished and so has his hope from the Lord. But then he says one thing that I will call to mind. Therefore I have hope. He talks about the hope that he has in the Lord, even as he says that hope has perished. That is so true to our lives and to our experience. And this is what prayers of lament bring and offer us, to give us voices to be able to say things like this and to process through it. The Psalms are also a wonderful place to find prayers like this. In the Psalms, we see prayers of lament for an entire community. You see prayers of lament for individuals. It is just laden with these sorts of prayers of crying out to the Lord with our suffering and our sorrow. And so praying these sorts of prayers, as you can see here, it helps give us the words that we need to pour out our hearts to God and to hear his promises then in our grief. These prayers that we find, they are a gift to us that we might find our own heart's sorrows in God's own words. That's incredible. What a gift. They help us really feel our sadness and our grief and our confusion, not to numb ourselves to it, not to gloss over it or to distract it, but to truly feel it and engage it and process it as we are led into a greater dependence on God's grace and mercy to sustain us in these difficult times. And so I encourage you to take some of these prayers of lament, especially in this time when this is the time to lament. This is the time to voice our concerns, our fears, our sufferings. Voice them to your Lord, because he wants to hear that from you. He's designed you to cry out to him. And so don't go on the offensive. Don't go on the attack. Don't just suppress them. Those are not the ways in which you have been designed to handle your fears and your sorrows. Weep and pray. That is what lamentation is all about. So there you have it. That was our final practice as we've been walking together over these past 5 weeks. Listen, it has been a joy to do this. I have learned a lot throughout this entire process, and I hope you have as well. I hope that you've been able to take away at least one practice that has really vibed and jived with your heart and with your journey of faith. Those that have not been super helpful, that's okay. Just let them go. But hold on to the ones that you have found, that this is actually a great way that I can put myself in a position to visit with Jesus, to experience his transforming presence in my life, in the mundane and the ordinary aspects of my day. And so I hope, again, that you have learned something. I hope that the Lord has shown himself to you in a new and special way. And I pray that you have the stamina to continue in these difficult times, drawing yourself closer to the Lord, who is drawing close to you. And so may blessings be upon you and your family, and we'll see you again.